Okay, so I've come up with a couple of simpler parts to kind of start off with. So we're going to do those. I'm going to go through some step by step. This one is going to explain the process of just kind of the view orientation and adding and subtracting our extrusions. So we've got some cutouts and some shapes and stuff like that. One thing that's different about this than what we've done so far is these numbers are not inches, these are metric numbers. So in Inventor, when I go to add my new file, I need a metric file and not my standard IPT. So what I'm going to click on here is I'm going to go to this, expand it here and go to metric and then click on standard MMIPT and hit create. So that's just going to give me millimeters as my units, so I don't have to do anything else with it. Okay, my orientation is still the same with my planes as yesterday. The workflow and everything else is going to be the same. So to get started, when I look at a part, I try to figure out where the best representation of the shape is and start from there. You could start with a big giant rectangular prism and remove and material and stuff like that. You could start with a box on the bottom and kind of build up and out and over. But with this one, when I look at it, I see this shape here, this kind of like Z-ish shape. That's going to give me a good majority of my features. When I make that, I'm just going to have to cut out this notch, and add this cube to it. All right, so I'm gonna start off by drawing this. So I'm going to start my sketch on that XY plane, and I'm going to use that origin point as a reference. So I'm going to just start drawing the shape. So right now this is telling me it's 90 degrees and vertical, which is good. Now I have 90 degrees perpendicular. And so as I go around, I want to make sure that those perpendicular constraints are in there. All right, I'm going to mess up here and I'll show you how do we fix that. So if we end up with any of them that are not perpendicular, so notice I have a parallel constraint that was created, but I've got this little bit of a line over here that's goofy. I can fix that by either making that line vertical, that's one, or I can add a perpendicular constraint to it. It's another way to fix it. Or I can make it parallel, so this is my parallel constraint, to another line. All of those will do the desired outcome of having that all be 90 degrees and stuff like that through there. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and look and start off with some dimensions. I want to do my overall dimensions first. So 60 tall, and then I have 80 plus 30 wide. I could measure these two as 80 and 30, but I like to add a big dimension if I can. And it's not real difficult to do 80 and 30 here. So 60 tall, 80 and 30. So I'm going to dimension from this top line to the bottom line, and that becomes 60. Oh, it disappeared. So your scroll wheel will zoom in and out. Pushing on your scroll wheel will drag it around the screen. Right. So now this is 80 and that's 30. Again, I could do those two, but I'm going to grab this measurement, or that line, and this line, and I'm going to say that this is 80 plus 30, which gives me my size. Right. Then, while it's fresh in my head, that was an 80, and then this has to be 30. So if I try to dimension it, it's going to tell me not to do that, so we hit cancel. Okay, so I've got that. That's my first step. And so now I got to look at where some of the rest of the features are. So this notch coming out is 40 up from the bottom and 20 over. So we notice when we go here, these two lines are both purple. So if I make this 40 up from the bottom, and if I make this 20 over, they turn black and it kind of shifts everything off that location. All right, so now I have one more feature left to do. If you're unable to tell by the drawing what you need to dimension, we escape out of our dimension command. So I hit escape. If I grab this line, I can move it. So notice if I grab like the corner, it won't move left and right, it moves up and down. So that tells me I need a measurement on this line or between something. All right, so I'm looking for a vertical measurement. So I go back over and I'm looking at what's happening around here, and I usually move my mouse around and I see a 30 right here. It's a little hard to see, but there's an extension line coming off the top edge, and then it's showing here, so it's telling me that this line is 30 millimeters from that line. So dimension, that line to that line is 30. So now all of my lines have turned black, and down here in the bottom, it says that it's fully constrained. So I'm going to finish my sketch. We'll zoom a little bit here. Now I see how wide it is. So I look, I got a 50 down here. I also have 10, 30, 10, which adds up to 50. So my extrusion is going to be 50. Okay, so there's my first part of my model. Right, it's kind of starting to look like it should. So now I have to cut this out, cut that out, and add that. So let's start up here. I'm going to look exactly how I see it on here. I'm going to create a sketch on the top. I'll notice it kind of spun it around on me a little bit. So if you want to spin it this way, we can. Right, whatever makes sense to you. You can even keep it in that isometric if you want. It gets a little bit goofy. I wouldn't recommend this, but maybe as you're getting started, it's a little easier to see. Okay, so I have a rectangle that's going to be inside here. It's 20 millimeters in from the edge, 10 on each side, or 30 across. And I'm not going to need all of these. This is actually kind of incorrect dimensioning here. So I'm going to grab my rectangle command, and I'm going to go back like this, and I'm going to bring this down. Okay, so the rectangle gives me a whole bunch of those constraints already. So now I can add my dimensions. I know that it's 20 millimeters. We'll do this real quick. So we'll grab this, we'll drag it to the side. We'll drag that to the side. We'll move this over a little bit. We can kind of zoom in. All right, so I got 10 from this line to this line. So 10 from there to there. And then I got to pick one. I can either go 30 across or 10 from the other side. I'm just going to do 30 across because it's a single line to click on. Everything's black. If I add that 10, it yells at me, so I hit cancel. Okay, so we'll finish that sketch. It spins it around. We're going to have an extrusion, but we don't want to add material. So our outputs down here, we want to go to a cut. All right, and the cut's going to come down. There is a measurement on here, but if we kind of look, it doesn't really tell us anything how far down it goes. So we're going to assume it goes all the way through. So we can kind of see what it's doing there. So I'm just going to click on this, which is through all. So by clicking on through all, if whatever this part was used for, if I need to make this thicker or thinner, this cut would still work. I wouldn't have to change that. Okay, so we have that. So I'll do the same thing on the front. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I got a rectangle coming off the bottom. It is, oh, wrong thing here. Get out of my rectangle command, D for dimension. It is 20 inches, or sorry, 20 millimeters wide, 10 millimeters tall, and it is 15 millimeters from the edge. Okay, so again, finish my sketch, extrude, cut, all. Right, so it goes all the way through. All right, and then the last thing here is going to be to do this cube that comes out the front. So when I look at what's going on here, I definitely have something wrong with my drawing here. So we'll fix that in a second. All right. Oh, so what I have is I need to remove this here because I did the 80. So I've got to remove. So I can put a rectangle on this side and draw it like this. I can put a rectangle on the top and cut down. I can put a rectangle on the front and cut back. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to put it on this side feature here. Grab my rectangle from the corner down. Okay, and I'm going to use another constraint to line this up. I don't need to measure it because I already have the geometry there. So I'm going to use my coincident constraint. The coincident constraint takes a point on something and we'll put it on another line. So you'll notice it lines those up. And then when I dimension here, this is 30. And I don't have to finish my sketch. I can cut. This one I'm not cutting through all. I'm going back 25. So this is going to cut 25. And there we go. So that's our first model. I'm just would save this as, we can save it as 3D-264. We'll save this in here. I'm going to save this as 3D-264. So I can reference it. And that's how we make our first model.